In the spring of 2019, the quiet and affluent suburb of Collierville, Tennessee, was shaken by a brutal crime that no one saw coming. Residents of the peaceful community were accustomed to church gatherings, family events, and safe neighborhoods where neighbors greeted one another by name. So when gunshots echoed through the Meridian Parks apartment complex on the night of April 4th, panic spread instantly. Witnesses later recalled hearing several rapid shots followed by a woman screaming and then another round of gunfire. Police rushed to the second-floor apartment and discovered a horrifying scene. Lying in the doorway was 36-year-old Pastor Brous Perry, bleeding and unresponsive after suffering multiple gunshot wounds. Nearby, his wife, Tabitha Perry, had also been shot in the shoulder while trying desperately to protect him. Inside the apartment stood 39-year-old Dr. Latasha Daniels, calmly reloading a 9mm Ruger handgun as officers shouted commands at her. She appeared detached from reality, muttering quietly to herself while ignoring police instructions until officers subdued and arrested her. For the community, the entire situation made no sense. Brous Perry was not known as a dangerous man. He was a respected pastor who had recently joined Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church in Memphis after previously serving at St. Mark Baptist Church in Little Rock, Arkansas. To many church members, he was charismatic, compassionate, and deeply devoted to his ministry. Friends described him as intelligent, ambitious, and passionate about helping others grow spiritually. His wife Tabitha stood faithfully beside him throughout his ministry career, and together they appeared to embody the image of a successful Christian couple. But as detectives began digging deeper into the events leading up to the shooting, they uncovered a complicated web of deception, manipulation, secret relationships, and emotional destruction hidden beneath the pastor's polished public image. Investigators soon learned that Latasha Daniels was not a random intruder or unstable stranger. She was a respected therapist with a doctorate in social work who operated a private counseling practice in Little Rock. She specialized in behavioral health and anger management and even founded a non-profit organization designed to help people overcome adversity and emotional struggles. Online, she shared inspirational messages about healing, resilience, and self-awareness. To outsiders, she appeared successful and compassionate, yet privately her life was unraveling. Latasha's own marriage was collapsing, and according to friends, he felt devastated by the possibility of experiencing another failed relationship after already enduring a painful divorce years earlier. During this emotional turmoil, she sought counseling and guidance from Pastor Brous Perry through their church in Arkansas. What began as pastoral counseling eventually evolved into something far more intimate. According to Latasha, their affair started during their second counseling session when Brous made his attraction toward her unmistakably clear. Soon, the two began a secret relationship that lasted nearly 2 years. During that time, they became deeply entangled in each other's lives. Latasha cooked meals for him almost daily, bought him expensive gifts, accompanied him on bike rides and runs, and spent countless hours with him in private. She believed they shared a profound emotional and romantic connection, while Brous reportedly painted elaborate fantasies about their future together. Yet unknown to Latasha, he was telling entirely different stories to different people. As investigators searched through digital evidence after the shooting, they uncovered shocking videos and online conversations revealing a hidden side of Pastor Perry that stunned even those closest to him. The respected pastor had become deeply interested in a lifestyle known as ethical non-monogamy, inspired in part by a book called The Ethical Slut. In private group chats and recorded video messages, Brous openly discussed the idea of maintaining multiple romantic and sexual relationships simultaneously while presenting them as consensual and transparent arrangements. In those conversations, he claimed that his wife Tabitha fully supported his lifestyle and had even approved of his relationship with Latasha. He referred to Tabitha and Latasha as sister wives and spoke casually about potentially expanding his relationships further. He described rules that supposedly governed his marriage, including restrictions about who he could date and where those relationships could occur. To the women in his online groups, Brous portrayed himself as a progressive husband openly communicating with his wife about every detail of his relationships. But according to Tabitha, none of it was true. She later testified that she had never agreed to an open marriage, never approved of Latasha, and had no knowledge whatsoever about the affair. In fact, she said the first real indication that her husband had been involved with another woman came when Latasha suddenly pulled out a gun and began shooting inside their apartment. The revelations left many wondering whether Brous had spent years manipulating both women for his own desires while maintaining the appearance of a respected spiritual leader. According to Latasha, the pastor maintained strict rules designed to keep their relationship hidden and under his control. They communicated only through an app called Confide that automatically deleted messages after being read. She claimed he instructed her never to contact emergency services if something went wrong while they were together, and instead told her to contact another pastor from St. Mark Baptist Church. She said he required secrecy at all times and discouraged her from approaching him publicly around church members. Over time, Latasha became emotionally dependent on him, believing he truly loved her and intended to eventually build a life with her. However, after Brous and Tabitha relocated to Tennessee for his new church position, the relationship began deteriorating rapidly. Latasha later testified that Brous started discussing the possibility of seeing additional women and expanding his non-monogamous lifestyle further, something that deeply upset her. She claimed she did not want to share him with more people and became increasingly distressed by his emotional distance. Then, on the day of the murder, everything collapsed completely. According to testimony presented at trial, Latasha received a disappearing message from Brous through the Confide app stating that he believed their time together was over. Moments after reading it, the message vanished forever, leaving her devastated and emotionally shattered. She later described feeling worthless, discarded, and manipulated after dedicating years of her life to him. In her emotional state, she drove to a sporting goods store in Arkansas and purchased a handgun along with ammunition. Prosecutors argued this proved premeditation, while the defense insisted she initially intended to use the weapon on herself during a mental health crisis. Latasha claimed she originally planned to drive to a symbolic location connected to painful memories, involving important men in her life, but changed direction after seeing signs pointing toward Memphis. Instead of ending her life, she decided to confront Brous face-to-face and demand answers. During the drive, she said he continued messaging her, telling her he still loved her, which only intensified her emotional confusion. When she arrived in Memphis, she first located him outside a cigar lounge they both knew well. She said they spoke privately and that he convinced her to come to the apartment because he planned to finally tell Tabitha about their relationship. Believing that the truth would finally come out, Latasha followed him home. At the apartment, Tabitha warmly welcomed her inside, completely unaware that this woman had been involved with her husband for years. The three sat together, making casual conversation for nearly 20 minutes. But according to Latasha, Brous never followed through with the promised confession. Instead, he acted distant and avoided eye contact, making it increasingly clear that he had no intention of telling his wife the truth. Feeling humiliated and emotionally destroyed, Latasha eventually stood to leave. As Tabitha walked toward the stairs outside the apartment, Latasha remained near the doorway with Brous standing nearby. What happened next would forever destroy all three lives. In an instant, Latasha pulled out the handgun and began firing repeatedly at Brous Perry. Witnesses later described hearing rapid bursts of gunfire while Tabitha screamed in terror. Brous collapsed in the doorway after suffering multiple gunshot wounds to the head, abdomen, arm, and back. When Tabitha rushed toward her husband trying to shield him, she too was shot in the shoulder. During the chaos, Latasha reportedly screamed, "You broke my heart." Police arriving moments later found her inside the apartment still armed and attempting to reload. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and she was charged with first-degree murder. Yet as the case moved toward trial, the story became far more complicated than a straightforward act of violence. During the courtroom proceedings in 2025, prosecutors painted Latasha as a scorned lover who meticulously planned revenge after being rejected. They emphasized the deliberate purchase of the gun, the long drive to Tennessee, and the repeated gunshots fired at close range. But the defense focused heavily on the psychological manipulation and emotional control they argued Brous had exercised over Latasha for years. Jurors watched the pastor's own videos discussing ethical non-monogamy, his relationships with women, and his claims about Tabitha's approval. They heard testimony about the secrecy, the emotional dependency, and the power imbalance between a vulnerable counseling client and a respected spiritual leader. Latasha herself took the stand and tearfully described how deeply she loved Brous and how devastated she felt when he abruptly discarded her through a disappearing text message. She insisted she never intended to kill anyone when she first bought the gun and claimed she experienced a complete mental breakdown in the moments leading up to the shooting. Tabitha's testimony became one of the most heartbreaking parts of the trial. She described how normal the evening initially felt and how she welcomed Latasha into their home, believing she was simply an old church acquaintance. She explained that as they walked toward the door to say goodbye, she turned around only to see Latasha suddenly raising a gun and opening fire on her husband. She described desperately trying to cover Brous with her body while screaming in confusion and terror. Perhaps most painful of all was her admission that she knew nothing about the affair or the hidden life her husband had been living. The only time Brous had ever mentioned anything remotely related to open relationships, she recalled, was when he once suggested a book for her to read. She had no interest in the subject and never imagined the extent of the secrets he was hiding. After hearing weeks of testimony, the jury ultimately rejected the first-degree murder charge but convicted Latasha Daniels of second-degree murder and reckless endangerment. Observers inside the courtroom noted that many jurors appeared visibly emotional during her testimony and seemed sympathetic toward her deteriorating mental state and the manipulative dynamics of the relationship. In February 2026, Latasha was sentenced to 20 years in prison with eligibility for release after serving approximately 17 years. During sentencing, she tearfully apologized to the Perry family and expressed deep remorse for the pain she caused, particularly to Tabitha. The tragic case left behind countless unanswered questions about power, manipulation, secrecy, and emotional vulnerability. What began as counseling between a pastor and a struggling woman evolved into a hidden affair built on lies and conflicting realities. Beneath the image of a respected church leader existed a man leading multiple lives, telling different versions of the truth to different people while attempting to control the narrative around him. And in the end, those lies collided violently in a small apartment doorway in Tennessee, leaving one man dead, one woman imprisoned, and another forever traumatized by the shocking truth about the people she trusted most.